Welcome guys, we've had the Belgian Grand Prix and it's that time where I go through and rate each and every one of the drivers and how they got on through the weekend, and we'll go through my predictions, review how did I get on. It looked disastrously wrong after the sprint, but have I recovered some dignity after the race? Let's dive in. Yes, we've had the Belgian Grand Prix and the talk of the town really is, was there much need for the late start to the Grand Prix? We had over an hour delay just because of some rain. I mean, we're seeing the F2 guys start in much worse conditions than the F1 guys in, and on top of that, to go with the rolling start, were the FIA and the race director a little bit too cautious? A number of the drivers raising concerns on that. Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen also saying, I mean, we could have got this race underway much earlier, but Fernando Alonso saying he felt it was quite dangerous, and he was towards the middle back of the pack, wasn't he? So probably worse conditions for him than some of the guys in the middle and up at the front. And the decision to go for a rolling start in that conditions was really bizarre, to be honest, because when you've waited that long, why could you not get underway with the lights out? Because that is probably one of the big, buzzes that you get when it comes to race day. That whole start, the adrenaline jumping, and that first lap is mega when it comes to Formula One. You lose an awful lot of that with a rolling start. Thankfully, it didn't make too much of an impact of what we might thought. Well, I definitely thought if we're going to go for a rolling start, I didn't think we'd see the advantage that we kind of see on lap 1 from a normal start down up into turn 5, but did Lando Norris go too early? Was it just a great move from Oscar Piastri and just that little bit more daring not to lift? Let's jump into it. Personally, I think it was just way overcautious to do what they did. The delayed start was pretty unnecessary. The rain wasn't massively heavy. You've got a set of wet tyres that are just redundant nowadays in Formula One. What is there any much need for them? It really just comes down to visibility, and it's a hard one at a dangerous track like Spa. But ultimately, these are apparently the 20 best drivers in the world, we've been told numerous times. So let's really see what they're made of. And these conditions really put that to the test. And it's a shame we don't really get to see that test when it rains heavy. And they, wet races in Spa years gone by make absolutely classic races. It's what this circuit sort of has built its reputation on the back of. And to be robbed of that is, a real shame in my opinion. A little bit of a purist and an old school thought on that. Love to know what you think of that. So get your comments in the section below, and I'll reply to them as quickly as I can. But yeah, I'd like to really know what your thoughts on that. For me personally, though, it just seemed like Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton said, overly cautious. We could have got that race underway a lot earlier and from a standing start rather than this rolling start nonsense. But let's get to the driver ratings, and we start as always with the race winner, Oscar the man Piastri. OP81 did it again. He put right what went wrong for him on sprint day. A brilliant move on Lando Norris, probably helped with Norris having that pack issue that he complained of, but the run holding on to Norris, did Norris go too early on that safety car restart? I think most definitely, because Oscar could just, sort of stay with him. He kind of read that really, really well. Good exit out of the bus stop, and then a really good exit out of turn 1. Norris didn't get a great exit out of turn 1. And like he said, he just, bit more courage through El Rouge, keeping his foot on it a little bit more than Lando Norris did, and he swooped around the outside, and from there on, he controlled the race brilliantly well. He had the tyre difference ultimately when Norris went on that hards. Initially it looked like it was potentially the wrong call, but quite quickly when he got them tyres up to temperature, it was really the right tyre to be on. Good call from Norris's side of the garage, because they were the only ones to try that hard. Everybody else went with the mediums. And Oscar, and how good this car is on the tyres, and what a good job he did to keep these tyres in check for as long as he did. Kept the tyres in check, had saved a little bit for reserve when he knew eventually that Norris would come all over the back of him, but it didn't quite get to that, just because of a couple of Norris mistakes really. But Oscar didn't really put a foot wrong, and not in the way Norris did, and really just cool, calm, collected, under pressure, drove an absolutely brilliant race. His sprint qualifying was absolutely phenomenal. To put over half a second on your teammate was absolutely brilliant. At a stonking lap, he looked on it throughout the whole FP1 session. He was the master of that sector 2. He just was untouchable through all of the sprint. In the sprint race, I think ultimately it was that cautious side of things where they went for the bigger downforce package, which meant that you just couldn't quite get close enough to Max Verstappen down that long straight and make the advantage that we've seen him have all the way through sector 2 really count. And I think he was really disappointed with that, but I think he'd be happy that it was actually Max Verstappen up front and not his teammate Lando Norris, because it was more points gained when he looks back in the sprint race. Had he held on for that win, it would have been a bigger points advantage, with Lando eventually third. But he put right what he got wrong in the race, and an absolutely tremendous drive. My drive of the day, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I've given him a 10 out of 10. Second place man, Lando Norris, will be absolutely disappointed with that race. I think there was a few mistakes there. Like I said, with the safety car restart, did he go too early? Probably he did. And then, obviously the pack issue was that, a car issue was that the way he'd used that behind the safety car. The team, were a bit coy on that. The CEO, Mr. Brown, I forgot his first name, Zach Brown, sort of saying, deflecting on that a little bit, didn't really go into too much detail, but, sort of took it more for the team than sort of to say it was a driver mistake on the pack issue, because Oscar Piastri had the same issue 1 or 2 laps later than Lando Norris. So was it just a way that it was managed under the safety car, or was it just like really a car issue that just occurred? They said they're going to look into it, but that obviously cost Lando Norris as well. The exit out of turn 1 wasn't great. And then in the end, I think he got the right call to go on the hards, but for 3 real mistakes where it cost him at least 3 seconds, if not more, would have meant at the end he would have had about 2 or 3 laps within the DRS of Oscar Piastri. And not to say he would definitely have overtaken Oscar Piastri, but he didn't get himself the chance to go and fight for that win for them mistakes. For the sprint qualifying, I think he was disappointed. A gap of over half a second behind his teammate was disappointing. The benefit, though, he was like damage limitation when it came to the sprint. He finished right behind his teammate. In the qualifying, though, he was absolutely brilliant to put over that half a second gap to go and take pole position. Probably, like, when he looks back, it was probably like, did he really want that? He probably wanted to slot right in on second place, and be the man to take that, that slipstream down into turn 5. But like I've said before, you can't qualify hoping to get P2. You just got to maximize it and see where you end up, because easily could have lifted and been a bit cautious and ended up 3rd or 4th. So yeah, disappointing. The best bit is, though, that it was real damage limitation. He came home behind his teammate in both races, put forward and put right the deficit that we've seen in the sprint. So credit on that side of things. I think just the little mistakes that we're seeing when the pressure is on, and this is what really could define this championship, is either way, like we've seen with Oscar with that sort of bit of mistake behind the safety car, got him that penalty, and Norris this weekend with just some driver errors in the race, the odd lock up here and there and running wide, and ultimately this is what's cost him closing in right in on the championship on Oscar Piastri and like really loading the pressure before that summer break, and he could have easily gone into the lead in the championship in the summer break. Now he's going to at best hope that he can just get back within 7-8 points of Oscar Piastri after Hungary, where he goes phenomenally well there. Brilliant wins before, so he likes it around there. So I expect him to be the man on it and to put things right where it kind of went wrong a little bit here this weekend. I've given him an 8 out of 10. P3 for Charles Leclerc, and I thought he drove an absolutely brilliant race. Great defensive drive early doors on their mediums, which that Ferrari chewed through, even though he was on a lower downforce setup, which probably what didn't help him on the mediums, but when it switched over and he can get onto them dry tyres, he drove brilliantly well. That early defensive drive to keep Max back was fantastic. The lower downforce probably helped him to keep Max back down the straight, because there was a couple of times where Max got within DRS and a good slipstream, but that skinny rear wing on the Ferrari really helped him keep Max behind. And a really good qualifying session to get himself up into P3 and finish on the podium was absolutely brilliant from him. A really good P4 in the sprint qualifying, got himself up into P3 as well, ahead of Lando Norris, but in the dry and with the setup probably not as optimized as it was in race conditions, couldn't keep Lando Norris behind. I mean, that car was phenomenally quick, about 7 tenths faster than the Ferrari, so he was always going to have a hard job doing that. But a podium and a P4 in the sprint was an absolutely brilliant job from him. I think he absolutely maximised everything in that package, and a brilliant weekend for Charles Leclerc, and him in his championship. A 10 out of 10 for me. Fourth place man, Max Verstappen, and yes, there was talk, can he be the only one to win from fourth place when it comes to mixed conditions? And the conditions didn't really, I mean, like, I think that's why he was probably moaning about the race starting, and rightly so, a good hour late, because it missed most of them tricky conditions where he can be an absolute star. It was just early doors. He was stuck behind Charles Leclerc, and then he lost about 10 seconds to Piastri up front. In all honesty, I don't think his race when he qualified fourth would have been with the McLarens, and he would have probably hoping at best to get P4, and he just couldn't get close enough after the pit stops and the dry conditions to Charles Leclerc within the DRS zone, really. So a bit of a disappointing race, but his SQ lap was brilliant to get himself and split the two McLarens, and his sprint was absolutely phenomenal. Great drive to steal the sprint win from the two McLarens, and this is why he's such a brilliant driver, a fantastic world champion. Puts that car where it shouldn't really be. The team car setup worked fantastically well for the sprint. They got that absolutely bang on, made that car mega slippery down that long straight, so they couldn't get within the DRS zone, and did absolutely enough to hold on for a brilliant win. I was going to give him a 7 out of 10, but I'm giving the extra point for that sprint win. I've given him an 8 out of 10. I thought he was brilliant in that sprint, but the race, not quite the Verstappen race we've seen before, and they'll be disappointed he didn't get past the Ferrari. So 8 out of 10 for me. Decent race from Max Verstappen in the end. Fifth place man, George Russell, started in P6, a much better race from him. The strategy call and to go early on them dry tyres was absolutely the right call. He was all over Max Verstappen. Had he got past Max, would he have been able to hold on? I don't think so, with the race pace that he had later in the race, but he absolutely maximised whatever he could out of that car. It really wasn't the car for this weekend. They've kind of lost their way a little bit. Mercedes looked like they were, back in the hunt with fighting the Ferraris and potentially getting closer to that Red Bull. Not really quite close enough to the McLarens yet at all, to be honest. But I think he absolutely maximised and a very decent result given the car struggles he had. Sprint though for him was disappointing. A P13 in qualifying for the sprint, and a P12 finish in the end, and that's really only one position because Gasly didn't take to the start of that race. So two very mixed races, but I think a P5 was much more than he could have hoped for, and I've given him a 7 out of 10. Sixth place man, Alex Albon, and he put himself in a fantastic position with that P5 in qualifying, and from there on he drove brilliantly well. The right call, pit at the right time for the mediums and the slicks when everybody else did, probably 1 lap earlier than and most, so good call there. And then drove brilliantly well to keep Lewis Hamilton back. He was within the DRS zone a couple of times, but the slippery setup on that Williams worked perfectly well for him, maximised that. I don't think he would have thought he would have kept hold on to that P6 when you had Lewis behind in a probably a faster car, but really good points finish from him. A fantastic drive, defended brilliantly well from Lewis Hamilton, no room for error, and he didn't put any room for error. An absolutely brilliant race. In contrast though, his sprint wasn't very good at all, was it? A P16 in qualifying for the sprint, and he finished there in the end. So yeah, it's almost a reversal with his teammate that we've saw from the sprint to the race. But yeah, overall, I've given him a 10 because I thought that was a really good, outstanding drive from Alex Albon. Difficult conditions. You've got a faster car behind. We've seen, Norris make mistakes up ahead, and he just made a really good, clean, solid race to hold on for some brilliant points for him and the team. 7th place man, Lewis Hamilton, and the driver of the day for most. Pit lane start to P7, he had a power unit change, much needed changes for him. I mean, he'd had 2-3 real horrible sessions. I mean, sprint qualifying was a disaster, the race wasn't any better, and for the qualifying for this race was awful. He was way down. Pit lane start in the end, but what a recovery drive. He was absolutely mega in the early parts of that race, has made up 5 places, and then the right call, the first man onto them, dry tyres, and that was experience that sort of counted there. The biggest disappointment would be that he just couldn't get enough past Alex Albon. Got within the DRS zone, but yeah, from there on he had a lot of lift and coasting to do in that Ferrari. It's an issue that they've been having for quite a number of races. Both him and Charles Leclerc have had to do that. So but for that, would he have got closer and been able to pass Alex? We'll never know, but that's something that the team sort of need to work on. They can't be lifting and coasting for as long as he did, because it's potentially cost him a place into P6. I think he might be a little bit disappointed it wasn't a P6, but when you look at overall of how bad a race weekend it was up until the race, a brilliant recovery drive. I've given him a 9 out of 10 just because all them overtakes, it was only him on track that seemed to able to do that, and a great call to go on to them slicks at the absolute perfect time, and it brought him a sort of good haul of points, and picked up a massive amount of positions. 9 out of 10 for Lewis. 8th place man, Liam Lawson, and a much better race for him. A much better weekend. Qualifying was in the top 10, 9th position start, and then got himself up into P8. Good call on the strategy, and then the one stop was a really good call. Managed the medium tyres to the end brilliantly well from him. And yeah, much needed upturn in performance for Liam Lawson, the kind of Liam Lawson we've seen previously, and he just needs to keep this ball rolling because he's been outshone by his teammate for much of the season, hasn't he? Whichever car he's been in. So really good to see him just get back on top of things. Sprint wasn't great really, P11 in qualifying, and that really made it difficult for the race. Finished P10 in that, was beaten by his teammate in that, but yeah, made it count when it did in the race, and drove really well to pick up some good points for the team. I've given him an 8 out of 10. 9th place finish for Gabriel Bortoleto, and I think this was one of his more complete race weekends. He was brilliant. Beat his teammate when it come to sprint day. Yes, it didn't result in any points, but a P9 finishing there, and in the race a really good qualifying session. Beat his teammate in quali into P10, and finished P9 right behind Liam Lawson. Didn't quite have the pace to catch Liam in the end, and P9 was probably the best he and the team could have done in that car, but really good to see him finish right up in there in the points. And this stardom that we've all heard and talked about how great Gabby is, kind of not seeing really quite what he's made of. He's had sparkles and moments, but this was a real good high moment for Gabby Bortoleto to come home in that, and bring up some much needed and important points for the team. So when his teammate's not doing it, he's doing it, which is really good for the team and promising, and really good good for his confidence to do that in a difficult track, difficult conditions. We can see how horribly it can go wrong for rookies in conditions like this, but he did a brilliant job for me. I've given him a 9 out of 10. 10th place finisher Pierre Gasly kind of stole that a little bit from Nico Hülkenberg, to the fact that he pit, but I think his guys had a dogged few races, really good defensive driving, and to come home with the points, the right call to do the one stop and to struggle on them tyres, managed to hold them really well. The setup of the car was the right call. He went for the low wing setup to try and help them down that straight, especially when they're down on power, and it's kind of what they needed to do rather than worrying about getting them round the corners, and he did really well to hold on in the wet conditions early doors. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Very good point, hard earned point for Pierre Gasly, and he had 2 very good races really. I mean, well, he didn't really have a race in the sprint, but the setup for the SQ1 was absolutely fantastic. He got himself up to a brilliant P8 in the sprint. Qualifying, it's a shame that he couldn't get the car underneath him for the race because of the car issue. Didn't take part in that sprint really, did he? Did do just somewhat practice really, when it was 2 laps or 3 laps down by the time he started. Retired before the end of that sprint race. So yeah, disappointing, because it would have been a good couple of points in the sprint and the race had he managed to finish that or start that sprint race. But overall, Pierre has now had 2 very good back-to-back defensive races, and really shown what he's made of and why, you know, they rate him really highly in that team. And a phenomenal job from me. I've given him a 9 out of 10. 11th place man, Ollie Behrman, and I think he's just really a bit disappointed with his car and his race weekend overall in the end, because a bit like Silverstone, where he's shown real promise, you know, actual real good racecraft. The car looked really good, but they just didn't maximise it, unfortunately, in the end. He was up into, well, the head of Pierre Gasly, would have been a net, or P11, would have been a net P10 when Nico Hülkenberg pitted, but then had some engine issue which cost him 3 places in the end, and that really is what kicked him out of and dropped him out of some points. His sprint race was brilliant. SQ, he finished in P7, so a real good promise of what this car was capable of. Shame it just didn't come out in the race for him. I've given him an 8 out of 10 because I thought he was actually really good, and but for that car issue, he would have had 2 very good results in the sprint and the race. Yeah, just a shame that it just didn't actually come off for him in the race. A little bit like Silverstone, where it was, you know, really promising for that Haas team, but it's just not quite clicking, and they kind of needed a bit like what Williams did a few races back, weren't they? They looked really good, but just weren't maximising it, and Haas are kind of doing the same, but they kind of really need to maximise this, considering how close it is in the team championship battle back there. But Ollie, I think he can be fairly proud with his weekend, although disappointed with the way the result fell for him in the end. 12th place man, Nico Hülkenberg, and well, after a brilliant podium last time out, this race weekend didn't really quite go to scratch, did it? I mean, the strategy call was questioned by everybody. Ultimately, he said, you know, he was on the mediums and pit for that second time because he just felt that he was just sliding, locking everywhere, and he had, 15 laps to go on that tyre, and he just didn't think it would make it to the end. Gasly behind him was on a better sort of lower downforce setup, and he felt it would just been a sitting duck at the end of the straight anyway, and so went to try something different, fresher tyres to try and catch up on Pierre at the end, but that just really didn't work. Left it almost too many laps towards the end, or too little laps to the end to make the difference and the advantage count. But if you go too early by the end of the race, you've lost the tyres anyway, so it's kind of a difficult balance to place on that side of things. But yeah, I think when you look at it, would he have been better just fighting and holding on tooth and nail for that final point in the end? I mean, obviously, whether they went one way or the other way, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. And then, he's the man driving this thing. When you see your tyres are not really underneath you and you've got an awful long way to go in the race, you can look back and you think that's probably why they made that decision there in the end. The sprint race just wasn't good at all either, was it? 2 really bad qualifying sessions just made life really difficult for him. And I've given him a 5 out of 10 for this weekend. 13th place man, Yuki Tsunoda. This is one of them, isn't it? A really, really good qualifying session, and you look promising. He got the full upgrades at what Max has been driving for some time now, and he only got that for the qualifying for the race. Didn't have that for the sprint, and probably explains why he had probably a bad sprint race, but qualifying was brilliant. And then it was just he said an error or misinterpretation with him and the team of why he pitted 2 laps later than everybody else and 1 lap later than everybody else in a long circuit like Spa is, you know, really costly, and that put him down out of the points into P12, and from there on it was a real struggle for him, even on the new dry tyres. He said he just really struggled with them tyres towards the end as well. He was passed by Nico Hülkenberg right at the end as well, so yeah, disappointing. P11 in the sprint, not so great. But it's such a really good qualifying session where it put him in the position to get home some good points. It's a shame it's really not come off for him this weekend. I've given him a 5 out of 10. 14th place man, Lance Stroll, and well, he had a bad start, didn't he? He was actually in a decent position in P16 and then dropped down 3 places to P19 at the start. Made a couple of passes in a decent race to get himself back up into P14, but he said that's probably all the car had underneath him. The strategy call was pretty much bang on, and even when you look at his sprint, it's kind of where he was in the race as well. Not at any point it just looked like the car didn't like Spa at all, and it's kind of what the car that they have at the moment. Fernando Alonso was saying the same thing, you know, it's some races weekends will be good, some races weekends we won't be bad, but I think Lance maximised everything that he had really in this car, so I've given him a 6 out of 10. 15th place man, Esteban Ocon, and well, he was really disappointed with his race in the end. 2 massive errors from the team. The first one was to pit so late off the inters when it was clear, you know, even if you just looked at Lewis's sectors for half of the first lap, everybody knew the next lap was to pit, so to go 1 lap extra than that, a bit like Yuki, not sure what they did there. And then oddly enough, they put a used medium in that one and only stop that they did, instead of when they had a brand new medium sat there, so not sure what went wrong for the team there. And he actually had the right setup for the race because he went for the skinny rear wing, unlike his teammate Ollie Berman, which would have given him good race pace towards the end, but ultimately running around on a used medium when you really didn't need to was just lost performance for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The car did look good at stages in the race, but just not quite enough, and to finish 15th when you started 11th, and potentially points should have been on when you had a good car and good setup, but yeah, real shame because his sprint was absolutely fantastic. A brilliant SQ lap to get him in P5, and he ultimately finished there and held on for that 5th place. I didn't think he'd be able to do that in that Haas team, but he drove fantastically well. So it's really hard to judge because he's had an absolutely awful race, but his sprint race was so good that I've boosted him up. I was going to give him a 5 out of 10, but I'm giving him a 7 out of 10 because his sprint was, for me, absolutely brilliant, and that's probably the highlight for him for this weekend, and he can hopefully take that forward when he looks at the team and what they've achieved with that, and you know, hopefully they can maximize more of that performance next time out. 16th place finish for Kimi Antonelli from the pit lane. He had another one with a power unit change, but he was so far down after a bad qualifying session. 2 real bad qualifying sessions. It's been a struggle for him this weekend, a real rookie struggle. He's had a little bit of a down dip, hasn't he, where he, you know, after he started off, for me, was alongside Isaac Hadjar, one of the most promising rookies that we've seen, but his season so far in the middle of the season sort of come off the rails a little bit. Needs to just sort of relax a little bit, just ease off the pressure. The summer break might come at a really good time for him, and he can hopefully just regroup a little bit after a tough couple of races where in wet conditions, and it's not that he can't do it in wet conditions. We've seen what he was able to do in Australia, so yeah, not sure really what went wrong for him in Silverstone and here, because his qualifying really just put him in a tough tough position, and it just made for a really difficult weekend. He's gone through a real bad run of form, 4 DNFs in the last 6 races, so just needs just a drama-free weekend next time out, and hopefully can improve from there. I've given him a 3 out of 10. 17th place finish for Fernando Alonso. He was another one that started from the pit lane, and yeah, he got himself up into P14, but then was stuck in the DRS trying behind Ollie Behrman. Said that he just kind of went for the wrong setup for him. He went for a wet weather setup, and by the time the race went underway, they were, you know, pretty much dry pretty quickly, and there was no inclement weather there to help him out and, you know, rescue things from really bad qualifying sessions. You know, shocking to be 19th, way down in qualifying. Sprint ultimately again just weren't good at all. They're out in SQ2, so car again really wasn't there, a bit like Lance Stroll for them this weekend. Alonso went with the wrong way with the setup, considering the race was pretty much dry after what 11 laps, so yeah, that just not a good weekend for him and Aston Martin. I've given him a 4 out of 10. 18th place finish for Carlos Sainz. It was a pit lane start, and then he was what, P18 finish for him in the end. He went for a setup change. Yeah, late call to go on the mediums for a second stop. Cost him. He was out P19 in the end. He was up into P14 before he pitted, but I think points didn't look on at any point, and probably a bit like Hulkenberg might have been really struggling on his tyres. Went for that stop and it didn't really help him at all, and he had 2 very mixed days, wasn't it? Role reversals when it comes to these 2 teammates. Like I said earlier, Alex Albon with a shocking sprint, and Carlos Sainz was brilliant in the sprint. A P6 in SQ1 sprint qualifying, and then a P6 finish in the race I thought was absolutely brilliant. And so to have that momentum initially and lose it would be really disappointing. The bad qualifying session, you know, it really made life difficult for him in the race, and then from the pits, they didn't quite get the calls that probably Lewis Hamilton did. It wasn't great through that. Yeah, 2 difficult races. I mean, again, is another driver that's had a brilliant sprint qualifying, but an awful race. So hard to judge, but I've given him a 7 out of 10, mainly because he had a really good sprint race. 19th place man, Franco Colapinto, and he, another rookie that's had a really difficult weekend. Could be the last time we see him in that Alpine. You know, we only knew he had a 5 race contract, so who knows, will he be there for Hungary, or will they make that change in the summer break? Who knows, because has he done enough to, you know, earn that seat? I'm not really quite sure. Early on it looked like he had good pace in the rain, but when that dried up, he was just absolutely nowhere. At one point it was 2 seconds lap slower than Carlos Sainz. On average, he was, what, 7/10 slower than his teammate. Yeah, difficult weekend. Sprint wasn't much better at all. Bad qualifying sessions really made it difficult. He was last in the sprint as well. So, yeah, difficult one to judge. Colapinto has not come in and had that sort of massive high that we've seen when he had with the Williams. Yeah, it's not really quite worked for him yet. We've not seen that Franco Colapinto that we've seen last year. So far this year, is this Alpine a little bit harder to drive? I mean, Pierre Gasly seems to be doing a pretty solid job in it. I know he's driving really defensively and really wringing its neck to get everything out of it, so it's clearly not a great car to drive, but is that some excuse for Franco Colapinto? Who knows? Let's see if he keeps that seat, but yeah, difficult weekend for him. I've given him a 2 out of 10. Isaac Hadjar finished last after a P8 start, and it was, yeah, a horrible race for him. I did think, and I did question with my race review when I put him in the 3 bad of whether he did have car issues or car damage. He did confirm in his pre-race interview that he had car issues for much of that race, and explains why he was so slow and so far back. Strategy calls wasn't great either. He was, you know, one of the last to pit from the Inters, came out P17, and then he had car issues. I mean, on average he was 1.6 seconds slower than his teammate. So must have been carrying some serious car issues, because he's not been that much slower than his teammate at all through much of any of this season. So putting a lot of his bad performances down to that car issue. Bit of a shame, because he had a really good sprint, beat his teammate in that. He qualified in P9, got the point and the sole point in P8. So a really good sprint race, a really good qualifying, and it looked promising, but the car issue put pay to what would have been, you know, had he pulled off a decent result, which was possible when you look at his teammate Liam Lawson. But for that car issue, I think he was on for a pretty solid weekend again. So I'm giving him a higher than I probably would have otherwise for finishing last. I've given him a 6 out of 10. On to the predictions review, and like I said, well, it was looking horrible after the sprint. For the sprint qualifying, I had Max Verstappen to take pole position, Piastri second, and Charles Leclerc in third. I mean, I got the Piastri and Verstappen turnaround, so to have them two in the top three, I'll take a little bit of credit for that. For the sprint, I did think Oscar Piastri would turn that around and take the win. It was actually the role reversal, wasn't it? I had Max Verstappen to finish second and Charles Leclerc in third, but it was Verstappen, Piastri and Norris. For qualifying, I thought Piastri would take pole, and he probably should have, because he's looking how good he was, but a brilliant turnaround for Lando Norris from his sprint qualifying to qualifying meant Norris took pole position. It was Piastri's lineup second, so I got the two McLarens in reverse, and I thought Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari would be in pole in third place. How wrong was I? But it was his teammate, and it was a Ferrari, and Charles Leclerc in third, so at least I got the right team. So I'm going to take a little bit of credit that, even though I got all 9 of them wrong, just sort of mixed positions. So the drivers, at least the top 3 right in who might be the top 3 in some of them, but yeah. Bit of saving grace, got it right for the race. I got Oscar Piastri to win the race, Lando Norris in second. I did think Max Verstappen would take third, but it was a brilliant drive from Charles Leclerc to pull that off. So 2 out of 12 decisions wrong, but just a couple of them just mixed conditions. I didn't think it would be a good weekend for McLaren and Ferrari. I'm going to take the credit for that, because a P3 and a P7 for the Ferrari I think is a very good result when it comes to race day. I thought it'd be a bad weekend for the Aston Martin, and I'm going to take full credit for that, because what P17 for Fernando Alonso and a P14 for Lance Stroll, and they were nowhere in the sprint. So yeah, some decent mixed bag of results there really for me in the predictions for the sprint. And yeah, let's see what happens next time out. We go straight into Hungary, so thick and fast before this summer break. We go to the Hungaroring, so watch out for the preview of that, and then you'll hear my reviews on the qualifying and the race also, so watch out for that. Let me know your thoughts on my predictions, any stinkers that I've got in there, any ones you completely disagree or agree with. Let me know in your thoughts in the comment. I'd love to hear from you. But thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, see you on the next one.